show business, it is a well-known fact to never work with animals and children. However, in the horror genre, using children or pet dogs as collateral was able to stir the elevated threat and tension of the situation, although it could likely take away from the final product if not executed to close perfection. For myself, I had been more affected by the demise of our canine friends on screen, and of course not comfortable with any sort of harm or violence against infants, toddlers, or preteens, even away from the screen or mere suggestions. Horror movies aside, sentimental dramatic features like Hachi, A Dog's Tale, or Quill have been tugging my heartstrings, leading me to steer off movies like Marley and Me. This coming from someone who had none of the impetus nor the patience to own a pet since like forever, despite incessant bugging from my children. In the world of horror, we have some memorable canine characters, and despite the admirable efforts from the dog handlers and trainers, there were only selective few that I would say worth a mention from the list below. In 2025, Shudder and IFC added another majestic performance from a Nova Scotia duck-tolling retriever by the name of Indy to the Hall of Fame of iconic performance in a horror movie by a dog. Perhaps this could be the top of the pile since Good Boy is a movie about the travails of Indy and told the story through his perspective for the entire 73 minutes long runtime. Todd is a man with ailing health and after discharge from hospital, decided to relocate to his late grandfather's house in a rural location. Like in the zombie movie Apocalypse Z, Todd had been on constant phone conversation with his concerned sister Vera, while his faithful companion Indy would be looking at him precociously like he was ignoring all the red flags about the relocation. It was mainly because Todd was not physically up to the arduous move and refurbishing of the old house, and perhaps partly due to the ominous history shrouding the house and the inauspicious passing of their grandfather. As with the law well known in East Asia, animals are very receptive to the supernatural, especially presence of an entity not readily visible for the human senses. Indy could instantly sense something residing in the house, some dark shadows that were creeping in corners and baiting for something. Meanwhile, Todd was hoping with close proximity with nature, it could be a holistic way for his health improvement. I read on some Instagram posting that dogs would dream about playtime with their owners. So sadly for poor Indy, his was filled with nightmares after the move. The serial haunting Grandpa's deceased dog Bandit had been suffering from prior to his tragic end, and the dark forces at play were spine-chilling enough to have Indy woke up whimpering. In a vast piece of forested land, with no one else in close proximity, Todd would make acquaintance with Richard, his grandpa's neighbour who was savvy with guarding his property with things like fox traps. As the dark entity inched closer to Indy and Todd for grievous harm, Todd's health took a beating, and his dog was the only one that could render any help, and our four-legged friend really did try his very best, yet would get maligned and been punished for being feral along the way. There had been some sort of an internet campaign about putting Indy in the shortlist for the best performance in cinematic world of 2025. I would not go to that extent, but Indy's authenticity in emotions, whether it's fear, affection or concern, was on display. Those puppy eyes, the snout with a pink nose, and the characteristic white pattern running in the center of the face made Indy a protagonist to empathize with, whether you are a canine lover or not. The full-fledged care and concern he expressed toward Todd was visible for all to see, and as a dog who had been left alone in the big house with creepy basement and a haunting that manifested in progressive fashion, the yearn for affection from his owner before getting ignored was gut-wrenching. The key attraction from director Ben Leonberg would be working up scary set pieces around the actions of Indy, which could be trained, and reactions which were very much harder to be extracted. The constant staring in the corner of the room would be relatable to pet owners, and as a starting stage of the manifestation, I thought the ponderous suggestion of entity was on point. Then come the creeping shadows, sometimes with candle flickering or lightning strikes, as strobing effects were highly effective as well. After the string of unsettling nightmares, Indy was blatantly unwilling to stay at home by his own, and we could see a sequence where he stayed by the window waiting for Todd's return from daybreak to sunset, which was another heartbreaking scene. But prior to that, when we saw Indy frantically scampering in the empty house, it felt like something menacing was watching from somewhere. The movie also provided some truly brilliant jump scares. A lot came from the entity with his hand outstretched to grab its victims. This was also sold in the marketing campaign, especially the various iterations of the poster. Aside from the scary dreamscapes, and before the engaging climatic end when the threat, despite its rather whimsical design, had malevolent intentions over our protagonist that affected audience like me. There were two memorable jump scares that made my skin crawl effectively. Of course, both involved the outstretched charcoal black hand. The first involved Indy cowering in extreme fear underneath Todd's bed, and then out of nowhere, an outstretched arm. The second involved Indy being punished by Todd and was chained to an outdoor kennel. Despite being wrongly maligned, he kept a vigilant lookout over his ailing owner before the entity commenced an heinous attack on the helpless hound. Beside the novel way of storytelling through the eyes of a dog, which of course void of any dialogue, but his actions speak louder than words, and a string of effective jump scares, the story that Leonberg and co-writer Alex Cannon concocted was a solid one and tight with less than 70 minutes to tell the story. The health issues surrounding Todd was well addressed. The ominous end days for Grandpa was aided with the old home videos and flashbacks from the deceased bandit, helping to highlight the threats residing in the house, and then the presence of Richard, who was the only person Indy could rely for help, which was not remotely convoluted. We could only hear voices from side characters like Vera and Richard, and we did not see Todd until the latter half of the movie. And I kept thinking it was Wyatt Russell in the role of Todd. The gangly stature and the abrasive nature and decorum he was so used to performing, as well as the voice, also resembled the actor. In the end, the review of actor Shane Jensen was a bit of letdown, though Todd was not the main star of this movie. The only other human character with face reveal was Todd's grandpa, who was first shown in the grainy home videos, and then a flashback to reveal the harm the entity had unleashed on him and Bandit. Grandpa was played by character actor Larry Fessenden, who worked extensively since the 1990s and with auteurs like Martin Scorsese. Having featured in many horror films since the onset of his acting career, Fessenden had also written and directed some horror films like Habit from 1997, as well as the video game Until Dawn, which movie adaptation was covered in this channel. Director Ben Leonberg sharpened his filmmaking craft through making several short films since the early 2010s. His notable works including Bears Discover Fire and The Fisherman's Wife can be watched on his Vimeo channel. Good Boy is Leonberg's directorial debut, and he definitely had been waiting on bated breath to tell a horror story that would stand out among the smaller features without major marketing power or well-known intellectual property. When IFC picked up the distribution of the movie, made with a modest budget of $750,000, there'd been a lot of online interest generated about the storytelling of a lawyer doc fending off supernatural being, and all the hullabaloo about Indy's performance was not uncalled for. In the end, Ljungberg and Cannon delivered a solid horror feature, gimmicky aside, and at a short run time, this is a gripping story that filled every minute without dragging its feet. The jump scares and the emotional remnants hit me and stayed even after watching it. This is a 9 out of 10 for me, and for avid viewers of my videos, this will be top of the pile for me for the year 2025. And with the year coming to a close, will there be another horror movie that could outdo Good Boy? This is why you need to subscribe to this channel to find out. Please click a like for this video while you are at it. Have you guys started watching Welcome to Derry on HBO? Maybe you can watch my extended review on It Chapter 1 and 2 from director Andy Muschietti. Now with Good Boy being a success critically and financially, I hope I do not see horror movies through the eyes of other pets like cats, terrapins or goldfishes. Looking at you, the asylum, you are the biggest culprit.